Hey everyone, good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you're coming to us from. I'm Megan Donnelly with Able Cine. I'm excited to be here today. This is another series of another version of our Creative Forces series. Hopefully you've seen some of our other really amazing live streams. Today I'm really excited because I'm joined by three women, really creative and versatile women who just completed a short film, part of the Women's Weekend Film Challenge. We're going to learn all about that process, as well as their backgrounds, what inspires them, and more about how they work together, what makes a good producing, directing, and cinematography team. So, with that said, hey ladies, how are you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
Hey.
I'm excited. This is the first time I've had all women, of course, on our creative forces. So thank you for joining us. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. I'm going to give you more background on our guest today. And before I do that, let me also introduce Nick Samara from Able Cine. He's with us today as well.
Hello, everyone.
Nick will be helping us with your questions. So please type in the chat if you have any questions that come up during our discussion, and Nick will throw them to us. So you'll hear his voice once in a while when he brings up an audience question. So we love it when you participate. So please do so. So with that said, let me dive into more about our guests, and we will also talk about the project and go from there. So I am really excited today again to be joined by these three women. All of them have such interesting and different backgrounds and very versatile fortes that we'll dive into. First, I want to introduce Jacka Sorey. She is from African and French descent. She's an actress and director who started her career in theater at a young age before transitioning to film and TV. Jacka recently starred in Hulu's episode of Black Stories Present, Imagine a Moon Colony, directed by Philip Yeomans, also a Tribeca 2019 award winner. Her short film, Wakanda, was an official selection of film festivals all over. She's also had a big background in producing, financing, and casting, so we'll definitely have to hear more about how all of those different backgrounds brought to what she's doing today. She's also a Women in Film member and has been selected to participate in their 2020 mentoring program. So thank you, Jacka, for joining us. We're excited to hear more about you.
Thank you for having us. Super excited to be here.
Awesome. We also have Alana de Freitas with us. She's an Australian-born actress, writer, producer, director based in Los Angeles. And Alana, I'm going to go more into your bio here, but when we had a call, you said the word slash, that you were a slashy, and I just loved that. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, it's my version of multi-hyphenate.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's perfect. So very versatile. In 2017, she founded her production company, ADF Productions. She's produced the short film Infidelity in early 2017, which was also her narrative writing debut. Prior to this, Alana had produced numerous narrative short films, in addition to a 12-episode internet lifestyle program, Lifebunk TV. Before the Dawn was De Freitas' first feature-length screenplay, and she also produced and starred in that film. It has also collected 17 festival laurels and was also awarded the Reframe stamp by Women in Film. This one I wanted to make sure I pointed out was the Sundance Institute for its gender parity, both in front of and behind the camera. So we'll also talk to her and to all the women here about the importance of representation of all different types of people in and behind the camera. She was also proudly selected to participate in the 2020 Women in Film Mentoring Program. So Alana, thank you so much for joining us. Looking forward to hearing more about you and what inspires you to be a slashy and do all these things that you do.
Thanks.
And then last but not least, I'm joined by Carrie Morgan. Carrie was born and raised in Bozeman, Montana. Her love of animation as a child is what originally drew her to the film industry. But she merged photography and motion pictures, and she attended film school at the University of Colorado Boulder. Working as a photographer, she traveled around the world from Australia to Israel, which is so interesting. We'll hear more about that. Eventually settling in Los Angeles, where she's coming from today, in 2013. Since then, Carrie has worked in various mediums as a director of photography, but she does state that her true passion lies with telling honest stories of human nature. She is in LA and is a member of the International Collective of Female Cinematographers. Thank you, Carrie, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are featuring these three women today, obviously because of their own right, all the experiences they've had and creative inspirations that we're going to talk about. But also, they all just worked together and completed a short film that was part of the Women's Weekend's Film Challenge. So, first, what I'd like to start off with before we show a trailer of the piece that is currently, waiting to shop around film festivals, I would love to hear from the crew here, a little bit more about, if you could tell the audience about what this film challenge is about. So what, kind of just give us a rundown for people that aren't familiar with what the Women's Weekend is about.
Sure. So basically, February this year, you submit an application. Hundreds of women submitted applications, and then they go through and select people for each role within a cast and crew. So you've got actors, you've got gaffers, you've got directors, producers, cinematographers, ADs, ACs, etc. And it's about putting a crew together of all females to work together to give each other opportunities, to expand their networks. And then you're given a genre and a prop, and you have a long weekend to go away and make it come to life. And we have all sorts of amazing sponsors like Able Cine who help us bring that film to life.
That's amazing. It's like a longer version of the 48-hour film challenge, but I love that. Of course, it's promoting women in front and behind the camera, and so we'll dive more into that as well. So how about, what I would love to do for the audience is show the trailer so they can kind of get an idea. And then after that, we will dive more specifically into the project and how you completed all of this in such a short amount of time.
Great.
So with that said, the trailer.
Look what I got! Champagne, tequila, champila!
Really? I thought this was gonna be our day. This whole thing, it's just, I'm not even supposed to be here.
Really amazing. I love the trailer. I actually got to see a secret screener of the short, and I love the concept. I think it's pretty amazing that you did all this obviously so quickly, and then also, speaks to your talent with not only the quality of the story, but, the high production value.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So why don't we dive into it a little bit more? I think what would be interesting is if we hear how each of you had first heard about the challenge, and then we can kind of get into, how you ended up working together and what that was like. But how had you heard, had you heard about this challenge before, or how did you find it?
Well, I'll start because I think that I probably heard about them the first. So I used to live in New York. I just moved to LA, but I did which I think was the first Women's Weekend Film Challenge back in September 2018. I'd heard of them, I don't even remember, through a group on Facebook or something, and I submitted my application as an actress, and I got it and did it with them. Their first one was entirely financed and funded by themselves. They put their own money to do it. And I don't know how they did it, but it was basically 10 teams of women making short films all over New York over the weekend. That was an unbelievable experience. And my director, really inspired me. I thought it was just wonderful. She led us into that project, and all those women coming together to create something the best quality possible and in a spirit of sisterhood. I completely fell in love with the process. And I really thought about, I would love to do a second one and try to direct, because I was starting to direct myself. So when I moved to LA, and then they came to LA, and I made sure I supported them throughout the years, because I thought what they're doing is wonderful. It's way more than a challenge. It's really a networking experience. It's an opportunity to, just challenge yourself. And then you end up with about 200 contacts of women in the industry that you can tap into for your next projects. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, I think it's really amazing. I hadn't heard about it before. I actually had just moved to LA when I saw everyone prepping at Able Cine and prepping their camera packages, and had found out about it that way. So really interesting. And I think you're right. It's more than just a challenge or the type of 48-hour film challenge concept, because of the possibilities of your connections and what that can teach you and where that can go.
Yes, absolutely. And I must say that between the first one and this one, there was a complete world of difference. After each challenge, Tracy and Katrina ask you to actually give them feedback and, tell them what you think could be done better. And they listen and apply those comments. And then, for this one, we ended up with like amazing, probably 10 or 12 sponsors, Able Cine, the Zeiss lenses, HBO. It was incredible. We had, Carrie will talk about the gear and everything. We had a full truck of goodies, and I could not believe that I was lucky enough to have that.
Yeah, that's amazing. All the community sponsors, we were happy as Able Cine to be a part of it, and to really help provide tools that can allow you to do the best work that you can. So that's great.
Exactly.
I think I love that they ask for feedback and they take it and improve on the next one. That's really amazing. So Alana, how about you? How did you hear about this weekend challenge?
I'm not certain that I remember. I want to say probably Instagram. I follow so many female filmmaking pages that I'm sure I must have heard about it through Instagram. Either that, or potentially, obviously I'm a Women in Film member, potentially they might have given it a shout out in one of their newsletters, but I don't remember how I first came across it. And I know at the start of the year, there were a whole heap of different female focused competitions and things going on, and I know I was submitting to a bunch of different things at once, so they're a blur.
So it's an application process, and then you specify what role you would want to take on the project, right? And then they basically create a team from there.
You're able to give preferences, like you can put your first preference is producer, your second preference is director, and your third preference is writer, or whatever, under all of the categories that they have. And then yes, they choose the best people and put together teams of roughly about 30. This year was 30 in LA, so it's a full team. It was a great amount of people to work with.
Yeah, that's amazing. It really opens up your networking capabilities and your community.
Sure.
So Carrie, how about you? How did you kind of get involved with this challenge?
I think I'm with Alana. I think I first saw it on Instagram. It was either Instagram or Facebook. It was kind of a lot of, as she said, a lot of the female focused pages were promoting it, and it sounded like an interesting way to network and meet more driven women in the industry. And I just love meeting more people and working with different groups, and it seemed like a great way to do it in a very short period of time and a slightly stressful environment. But yeah, it was just one of those things where I was like, you know what, I'm not working that weekend that I know of, might as well apply and see what happens and see if I can meet some really cool people.
Yeah, that's really great. So I think it'd be really interesting for the audience to hear. I know a little bit more about it since you dived into it with me, but if Alana, maybe you could talk through what the 4 days or so that you have looks like. You know, how did you first meet? How quickly did you have to get to know each other? And, you know, your genre and all of that. Kind of give us more of a breakdown on how it happens.
Sure. Yeah. So I was the team leader and producer for our team, and I think they choose the producers first because I know I started meeting with them well before everybody else was brought on board, and then they were just kind of running us through like the training and how the program would go. Then I was given my crew. So I'm not sure how the other team leaders work. There were 6 teams, but I wanted to speak to everybody ahead of meeting. So our first planned meeting was was it Matthews Grip and Electric?
Yeah, it was.
And that was maybe like a week before the challenge started or something. And that was all of the teams. So you had, 180 women in this place, which was great energy, great vibe, very exciting. But so in that week beforehand, I was on the phone talking with every single one of the crew and kind of just running them through what the weekend would look like and what the role and responsibilities would be. And just kind of, because you don't get your genre, you don't have a script, you don't know it till you're about to start. So just kind of prepping as much as we could ahead of time. So on the Thursday night, and Carrie will probably talk a little bit more about this, they were prepping equipment and stuff like that, and we were all at Jacka's house, and we were on a live Zoom waiting to have all of our genres announced so we could get them together as a team. That was announced, so we got our genre, our prop, then Jacka, myself, and we had 2 writers who had never worked together before. We kind of ducked away into another room to talk about what our genre is buddy comedy, what our story might look like. And then we kind of got a bit of a plot going, and then Jacka and I left them to write. So they were writing overnight, and we decided we were going to shoot at my house. And then so we're up first thing in the morning waiting for the script, and the script comes through, and then we probably had a couple of little adjustments that we needed to make because the writers hadn't seen the location yet, obviously. So we adjusted it a little bit for the location. They did a quick rewrite for us. Everyone was, showing up to my house from very early in the morning, bringing catering and stuff for breakfast. We had some great food sponsors as well. And then, so that first day we're kind of like pre-production, the fastest pre-production you've ever seen in your life. And then we started shooting that afternoon. So shooting all day the Friday, all afternoon the Friday, all day the Saturday. And then Sunday afternoon was post, and then you have to deliver it on Monday. So yeah, I mean, it was a crazy whirlwind. Like that was a very, and as we were shooting, we were passing off footage to our editors, and they were, putting a cut together as we would go and that sort of thing. So we were making the most of our time, but it was a very cohesive experience. I mean, it's ours is what, a 15-minute film? No, 10. It's a 10-minute film. And yeah, it's great quality thanks to all of the equipment. One of the hardest things for getting films made is getting the financing, and that's where the value of sponsors is just invaluable to getting this all done, because it's such high quality equipment creates a really high quality product.
Right. That's a really good point. And you can see in the trailer, the production value is there. And I think that speaks to all of your backgrounds and, level of creativity and knowledge, but then also the fact that the challenge is able to supply you with, different resources.
Well, and the other thing is, opportunities for women in the industry aren't as fruitful or abundant as you would like them to be. And so for some of the women, this is probably the first time working with equipment of that caliber. So it's a really great learning experience for them as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Had any of you worked on so this was an all-female crew and cast, right? Every participant. So had any of you worked with, significantly female crew before?
I mean, again, do they exist? I'm not sure. Someone could tell you it was an all male crew and cast and you believe them in a heartbeat. But if
Right.
they told you the opposite, you'd actually question them. Personally, on my projects, I just make sure that the crew and the cast that I work with are, represent the world that I live in. And for me, it's not hard at all because the world I live in is made of different colors, different, genres and different ethnicities and all the wonderful colors of the rainbow. And lots of them are in the industry and want to work. So just to come back to what you were saying, there was one thing also that made this film such high quality in terms of production value was the ultimate need and want of all these women to make the best little piece of art possible. That none of the 30 women, all of them showed up with, I'm ready to go and happy to be here. What do I need to do? It was incredible for me, at my level, to have a crew of 30 with that kind of toys to just make sure I was telling them what to do. Being a director is basically getting the hell out of the way of the best people you hire to do their job. And it was just wonderful to have that unity and that just willingness to just work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And for Alana and Carrie, what else, are there other things that you noticed too that were different for you working with an all-female crew?
I mean, I've produced a feature film with a smaller crew than 30, so it was great to have a crew that size. The feature that I did before the dawn, as you mentioned in my introduction, we got the Reframe stamp, which is an initiative of Women in Film and the Sundance Institute, which recognizes films that have gender parity and diversity in front of and behind the camera. So we had 60% female cast and 60% female crew. It is, and I know the challenge had trouble finding females in like the grip and electric and gaffer space. That was kind of where it was the most difficult, and that was where I had a hard time on my feature as well. And that's why I say that like this challenge is invaluable and was the reason why I wanted to do it as a producer, because I'm always looking to try to give opportunities to women. And, I haven't been in Los Angeles for the longest time, so I don't have a huge network here. And now knowing that I have, an abundance of women that I can reach out to for these projects in future, I'm not ever going to be like, oh, well, I can only get 60% women, because I know a bunch more now.
Right. Absolutely. And Carrie, how about for you, coming from cinematography and camera background, that's my background as well. And obviously it is one of the departments that is significantly, not always female heavy. So how is it different for you? And, do you see that going forward, that you have more connections now to female camera department?
It was actually one of the first times I've ever worked with a female gaffer. And it was absolutely incredible. It felt very collaborative, and it felt like, because sometimes it can be a fight when you're a female cinematographer working with, I hate saying this, but sometimes it can be that fight of being like, no, like, this is what I want. Please do the thing that I want you to do. But honestly, on this, there was never an instance of that. And we had a wonderful grip and electric team. And it was the first time I've ever worked with all female grip and electric team. And usually I have a hard time even finding one person. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite parts about this was now I have a whole group of people that I can hire again. And I have hired again. I had a short the weekend after it that I brought on one of the grips onto, and it was just amazing to be able to be like, now I have this whole that's Dina, she's incredible. Yes. she's such an amazing gaffer and key grip. Hire her. Anyway, yeah, but it was incredible just being able to work with all women, because I've never ever had that happen before. I've worked with a full female camera department before, but never grip and electric. So it was definitely an incredible experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually worked with one all-female crew, but to be totally honest, there was one position they couldn't find, and so there was like one man, and he wasn't really allowed on set because they were trying so hard to keep it all female. So I have had somewhat of a similar experience, um, and I would say it is different. I think something Alana touched on was important there about part of the challenge too is that everyone's diving in with this. We're going to be as collaborative as possible and we're going to, do our best effort. And that's not just a female trait. I don't mean that at all, but just the energy that was created as well, that everyone was working together and in it together, I think added to that feeling, that, trying to accomplish the best film you could do in this short amount of time.
Mm.
So Carrie, I would love to hear, we'll talk a little bit about equipment and style and the look and everything for a minute here. So Alana mentioned that, you were prepping the camera. I think it was Thursday before shooting the next day. You didn't even know your genre. So, a lot of times when we do these types of talks, we talk to the DP about, what about the story influenced your equipment choice, your camera, your lenses. And this one, you had to go the opposite way where, you're choosing camera and lenses before you really even know your story. So what was that like for you? And what was kind of your approach to making sure you were, prepared?
That was definitely the first time I've ever been told, like, you have to pick all your gear before you even know where you're shooting. And we were very worried that we were going to get Western. So I don't know why in my head, but I was like, it's going to be the hardest thing to prepare for. So in terms of some of the gear, like grip and electric, I kind of put on our list like a whole gambit of things, including 12 wise and 20 wise, like all of these things that I would need if I had to go out into the desert and shoot a Western. And lo and behold, we were shooting at a house. But it definitely became let's try to put together the most comprehensive like grip and electric package we possibly could that could cover any genre at any location, and we'll make it work. So that was kind of what happened with the grip and electric. And Cine Lease was absolutely incredible. They were so accommodating, because after we got our genre, we had to drop a bunch of things. We had to add other things, just so we had enough lights, so we could do some night shooting. So we had, like, as that photo shows, enough floppies so we could do car stuff. So really, it was amazing working with them in terms of the grip and electric. As far as the camera gear goes, I actually pulled up. So we had amazing sponsors. Red sponsored us and Zeiss sponsored us. So all of us, every team was given a red weapon, which meant camera was already decided for us. Couldn't really do anything about that for the genre. And it's a great little camera to work with that kind of can accommodate for every scenario, which meant lenses were how we were going to kind of determine what our look was. So Jacka and I actually, like 3 days before we even started prepping the gear, we had to give our lens choices, and we were given the choice of, I think, 6 different lens packages from Zeiss. Everything from the Ultra Primes to Supremes, Master Primes. What were the other ones? I think we had a couple of the older lens sets. I think CP2s were on there. So I sent her a bunch of lens tests of every lens and was like, look, we probably don't want something that will pigeonhole us too much into a look. So we immediately like cut out the ultras. We immediately cut out the older lenses. And so it ended up being between the Master Primes and the Supremes. And I had never shot with the Supremes before. And the fact that we were shooting like 8K full frame, it was just like, well, it kind of makes sense to try to shoot with Supreme lenses. They have a clean look, but it's, you know, it's still really beautiful. There's kind of a creamy look to them. So that's kind of, I was like, and we could use filtration to adjust to whatever genre we need if we need to. So we ultimately ended up landing on using the Supreme Primes. And I think we were the only team that used the Supremes.
Right.
Because part of it was the Supremes at the time had a very limited range. So some of the lenses, they had 18, or not 18, I'm sorry, they had like 10 lenses in their package. We had 6. So we were limiting ourselves with our ranges, but I was like, you know what, I can adjust for the range, but I like the look of these. So ultimately we decided to maybe handicap ourselves with having less lenses. But I really like the choice, and those lenses are absolutely beautiful, and they create just this beautiful, like, they just have a beautiful quality to them that I haven't seen in the other lenses. So that's kind of why I decided to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. They're beautiful. We have a couple stills from the film that we'll pull up momentarily here, and these stills are before color correction, so you can kind of see more of the raw image here. We can talk to Carrie about that more as well. Carrie, I also wonder, you know, I totally know what you mean about, you know, maybe you limited yourselves with the smaller set of focal lengths, but in another way, you know, so do you feel sometimes that it's better to not have so many choices, especially when, you know, you had this kind of quick turnaround of this production, you know, it was a little more, that way you could focus on the story and your lighting and, you know, some of these other things. Was that kind of a component that you found?
Yeah, and I think part of it for me is that since we didn't know the story, I didn't want to give, as you said, I didn't want to give myself too many options and then like overthink it.
Right.
Because especially, you know, for once we had the buddy comedy, it's all about these two people. Like, you really at that point you aren't playing around with too many long lenses. You aren't playing around in that end. And I actually stuck to mainly wide lenses. I did end up using them all because we had, you know, a few situations where we were shooting across the pool or things like that, where I went into the longer lengths. But I really just wanted to live with these people in their world and show the world. And so it worked out. I had the lens lengths I want and the lens lengths I normally use. There were a couple that I was a little sad at points. I was like, it'd be nice to have this, but it's okay.
Right. Yeah, and so, you know, with your team here too, all of you had met before this, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
one person on our team that I did know previously. We actually went to the same acting school together. So one of the PAs on our film I did know beforehand. We just coincidentally happened to be placed on the same team.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So just thinking about, you know, all these choices that you had to make for your roles, as well as, you know, collectively, you know, maybe each of you could kind of speak on what do you think works well with your, you know, how did you dive into a relationship with a DP you didn't know, and conversely with a director you didn't know, you know, what was that like and what helped you along the way?
For me, that was the reason why I wanted to get on the phone with every single person before we met in person, because normally, you know, you would be doing all your pre-production, and I knew we just weren't going to have that time to be getting to know each other. So I needed to have those conversations and work out what kind of personality types I was dealing with and that sort of thing. But it also was a little bit different on set, you know, because your pre and your post production are so short. Like for me as a producer, there were parts of it where normally I would be on set the entire time, and there were parts of it where I couldn't be on set because I was helping the editors with something because they were starting, you know, the editing process ahead of time, or I was I was chasing up music. I was trying to get musicians for tracks to put into the film. We've got some, great music in the film. So I was like dealing with contracts and music stuff. So that was all a little bit different. But I was confident ahead of time, having spoken with everybody. And everybody went into it with such a great attitude of like, yeah, we're going to get this done. It's a challenge, like just a can-do attitude. So there were no issues on my end where that was, yeah, it was great.
That's amazing. Jacka, how about you? What helped you think, dive into working with Alana and Carrie and the rest of your crew so quickly?
Oh my God, there's so many things to say. First, I was so eager to direct one of the shorts, and I was so grateful for the Women's Weekend Film Challenge to have picked me. But I'm a single child. I was raised by a single mother. I have a deep appreciation and love and passion for women in general, and I love when women come together. So I was just really excited. And then I have a passion for women DP. On all my shorts, my DPs are all women. I think they're little weird animals that are super geeky and so, can be so anal with their little toys. And I just love their passion. And it was interesting working with Alana, who's like the best producer that I've ever had, on top of her shit all the time. And I'm a producer myself, so that it was really interesting for me to have to let go some of the things that I usually control, because she is such a person that is in control, and she will run the show, and you can actually go ahead and do your thing, the things that you're supposed to be doing. But at the beginning, I was like, oh my God, she's really taking care of the whole thing. Well, that is great, because that's what you should be doing. So you should just relax and adapt. And it was just great to be, the bit of a captain of the ship of all these women. I remember we did a circle at my house when we got the genre. And by the way, I think Carrie was prepping in her head for Western, because I really, really wanted a Western. I did not want a buddy comedy at all. But that was the
That's
right.
so funny, because Carrie said she was worried she'd get a Western.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I had hinted that I thought a Western would be really cool to shoot. But now with the hindsight and everything, it would have been really hard. So I remember we all did a circle, and we all introduced ourselves. And the team, by the way, our team was Team Reed. So I got a shout out to Reed Morano, who just was with us. She supported us through tweets and everything. It was just amazing to have that beautiful goddess just support us. And so all the women of the team introduced themselves and said, I've never done this before. And I was kind of the last to speak. And I was like, no one has done this before. That's not how we work. We actually usually, you pick your team or the people you want to spend some time with, because it's going to be a stressful environment, and you want to make sure that. So we all have to let go of that. That's completely new. You can control the things you can control, and the rest you got to let go. So that was also challenging for yourself, and that was great.
Yeah, I think so far both of the things that you guys have pointed out are good lessons, obviously, that you can take with you to any set, right? And all of us work with, new crews a lot, and you might have a couple people that you've worked with before, but obviously new ones as well. And one thing I noticed about both of what you mentioned was, how you have to learn to trust the people you're working with, and especially in the challenge so quickly,
Absolutely.
And so for you to let go, especially when everyone here has had versatile backgrounds, you have to kind of let go of these other roles. And then the great thing is you get to focus on your role.
Exactly.
So Carrie, how about you? What do you think helped you kind of dive quickly? Are you used to working with different directors all the time, or what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with, God, probably 24 different directors at this point. So I'm definitely used to working with different directors, but I've never had it where it's like you meet the director and then you're shooting within 4 days. And it's
Right.
like, hey, our prep together is all of 4 days and we don't know what we're shooting. But honestly, it was kind of incredible because we met for the first time on Sunday, and then it was like, all right, let's start like going through what we like in terms of just movies in general, and in terms of like for the lenses, we went through those, and it was kind of one of those things where it became more get to know you and kind of know who you are and your style over those 4 days, rather than how does this affect this specific script. Because we didn't have a script. But it was really incredible because it was one of those things that was like you just have to let go and be like, this is what's happening, and it's going to be amazing, and we're going to create something amazing, and we'll eventually find out what the genre is and the script is, and when we do, we'll cram it out in 12 hours, and then we're going to shoot something that's going to be awesome. And honestly, like working with Jacka was such an incredible experience. She's so collaborative, and it was fantastic. We had every shoot has snags at points, and every time we kind of hit some kind of snag, we would just go off into a corner at the table and like work it out, and 10 minutes later we'd come back and be like, all right, this is what we're now shooting, because we don't have time to shoot the other thing because we're doing this in one day. And it was really incredible being able to collaborate so quickly together with having known each other for less than a week. And like, I don't know how they put together the teams, but I feel really lucky with the team that we had, because everyone did just like immediately gel and get along, and it just became this super collaborative environment where we could, if something came up, we could easily just like be like, all right, 5-minute break, let's figure it out, and then go back to what we were doing. So yeah, it was definitely one of the better or best like short film experiences I've had. And as Jacka said, Alana is an incredible producer. I feel like a lot of times on shorts, and on low budget shorts as the DP, I kind of get asked to end up doing some producer things, just because it's producers that are, there's they're either taking too much on or they don't have the experience as much. So I end up doing some of the things with, it's like, all right, I'll help you get bids for cameras. I'll help you get all of these things. And instead it was like, oh, I can just do my job. This is great.
Right.
I don't have to worry about any of that.
Everybody was great in terms of like there were no egos. If somebody needed help with something, on a regular set, it might be like, well, that's not my job, I'm not paid to do that. But everybody would just kind of pitch in and help other people. And at one point we were running out of time, and we were like, we need to drop a scene which was going to create a continuity issue. And a lot of DPs won't really get involved in story. But Carrie was like straight in there with ideas and helped us fix a continuity issue. And we were like, okay, yeah, let's go. So yeah, a lot of people were kind of like chiming in, jumping in, helping each other. It was a great vibe.
That's because the story is all that matters in the end. Like, I could spend all day lighting one scene, but if we only have one scene, you don't have a film. I'd rather. It's all about serving the story.
And I think sometimes we forget how much, it's like my background from theater. The minute you put your team together, your cast, you become a family for that time. And that's what film is. So sometimes it's also weird when awards are awarded to people, because it's actually those people together that made the best set possible to make the best work happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. I love how, Carrie, also you brought up how, because you didn't have the script together to talk about, you had to get to know each other in different ways. And I think that that's something sometimes when we work with people, we kind of forget, like we're only talking about the job, and and really learning what makes people tick and what inspires them, is going to help everybody work together. So I'd love to touch on that momentarily, because since this is a Creative Forces series, it is usually something that we talk about in terms of, what brought each of you to filmmaking, what inspires you, especially right now when we're all kind of in these different environments. Some of us are at home a lot. What are, you could either mention something that brought you into your career when you were younger, what really inspired you, or feel free to mention something now that kind of keeps you inspired and keeps you having this drive that is very clear from all of you.
I'm not sure what brought me. If I go right back when I was a very little kid, I would transcribe movies and I would force my cousin and my brother to act them out with me. My grandparents, my aunties and uncles. And I always thought that was like the little actor in me. But I look back and I'm like, oh, that was a producer and a director as well back there. Like, taking I would get so mad when they wouldn't say their lines right. But it was funny because I studied acting, right through school, and was always doing stuff. And it wasn't until I moved to the States, and obviously was still acting, but I got really kind of fed up with the types of roles that I would go out for. The just like blonde bimbo roles and like the sort of insignificant girlfriend roles. And, I had produced things in the past, but I never really thought of myself as a producer. Sometimes we sit around and we're waiting for someone else to call us that, or someone else to give us permission to be that. And then I just got annoyed, and I was like, all right, I'm going to make my own feature film. And I just like sat down and wrote something and then decided to produce it. And then it's kind of just one of those things, like I did it and I became it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it was kind of an ass backwards way of getting to it.
Love it. Jacka, how about you?
Well, I come from quite an artistic background with a father that was an actor and a screenwriter. So I would go on set with him at a really early age, and they threw me on stage when I was literally 6 years old. So I started with classical theater, I've done theater all my life, then musical theater. And quite early on, I was living in France at that time. I started writing just because I could, I didn't see myself represented. And I had the conviction, the ultimate dream that I was going to be an actress, that I was going to tell stories, that storytelling is my way of connecting to this crazy world. And no matter what, that's what I was going to do. So I wrote a play to start with, and then a second one, and toured with it. So I always kind of created my own content, but I never gave myself permission to think that I could do so in the film industry because it felt so out of reach. And I never had the funding to be able to go to film school or anything like that. So but when I came to the States, I just started switching my own mindset, and coming from a lack mindset to an abundant mindset, and trying to give myself permission to just move forward with creating my own content. So I started writing my first short, and I just gave a few phone calls to friends and said, do you want to do that with me? And they all followed. And I was like, oh my God, actually everybody has their own jobs, and they're all missing some creative ways to connect, and they're just waiting for that project. So, to tap into your community and bring your full self, affirming yourself. And on my end, for me, it's to try to bring different points of views to people, to an audience, to just have voices of the underrepresented, the non-represented, the voices that you never see, the colors that you never see, the accents, all of that. There's so many stories that we never see represented on the screen, and that's an issue, and I want to change that.
Yeah, I love that. And all of you stated that in your bios too, that it's, really inspiring and important for you to be a part of different ways of representing all kinds of people. We're not just talking about women here. just what, like you said, Jacka, about, what your life is like, your different surroundings, different people you, collaborate with and interact with. And I think that's really important. And it speaks to the point of representation. I know for female filmmakers, there was kind of an Instagram thing going on a while ago, maybe like a year ago, about female filmmaker Friday. And it was, at least from a camera standpoint, I saw it a lot because, we don't see a lot of females in all these different departments. And so just like you said, Jacka, growing up, like, people of all colors, all, gender identifying, need to see, themselves in roles in order to believe that it's possible for them often. So I think that's really important and great that you guys are all, doing that work alongside, your careers.
And shout out to Women's Weekend Film Challenge for keeping that in mind when they were selecting teams, because we had a very diverse team. It was all female identifying, so we did have trans members, but we also, our writers are both, champions for disabled communities. Like Natasha is legally deaf, and Diane has autism, and they worked so well together. Their communication styles, they were, for writing, for never having worked together is really difficult to come together. Just a genre and a prop that you have to include thrown at you and come up with something very quickly. So but it was super diverse. So I'm really grateful to the Women's Weekend Film Challenge for keeping that in mind with their selections.
We are not excited at all in that picture.
Tell us about that picture. Is that obviously towards wrap, or was there a screening, or what was it like after, we heard about the production? What was the post like and the showing of it?
That night was at the ArcLight Hollywood, and that was, I think, 3 weeks before COVID hit and we were all quarantined. It was crazy. We were riding high right there. We were on a roll. We were happy, and it was the after party. What?
Absolutely.
That this lockdown was coming.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally different experience.
So the Women's Weekend Film Challenge organized a premiere, and I think that's a huge part of the experience as well, is to acknowledge the work right after. So after all those non-hours of sleep, about a week and a half after, whenever all the films are ready, and it was 6 films, and we all went to the ArcLight all dressed up and all watched our work and the work of the other teams all together. And that was just fantastic. I'd had the experience previously in New York as well, and it was 10 films at the time, but it was only 200 women. So you also see that they also increased the number of the team, which, of course, is bringing the quality of the films higher.
Mm-hmm.
Not just that, but so many independent or low budget films, if you're lucky, you get distribution, but a lot of them go straight to VOD. To get to see your work on a big screen for all of the cast and crew is so exciting and so rewarding. So I'm super grateful for that experience for myself and for the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to hear the plans for the film, but before we go there, Carrie, I'd love to hear what that was like for you, like what kind of inspired you to get into camera and to filmmaking, and then also about the post-production, because I know you mentioned you did color correction, so we have to hear about that as well.
Yeah, I did do the color correction. I'll start with how I got into filmmaking. I actually have always wanted to work in the film industry, which is, as a kid from Montana, is not normal. I even when I was little, like 4, 5, 6 years old, I told my parents I wanted to work in the film industry. At that time, I was, only watching animated movies, so I was like, I want to be an animator, because that's what I watch as a 6-year-old. And I got really into animation for a long time, but then when I was 12 years old, my dad got a camera. Within 6 months, the camera became mine. And I had my first 35 millimeter film camera, and I went everywhere with it. And I just became obsessed with shooting and with taking photos of life and taking photos of just the world around me. And then in high school, we had a dark room at our high school. So I ended up by senior year spending half the day in the photo lab and in the dark room. And at that point, I had never heard of cinematography, but I kept telling my photo teacher, I want to work in animation. I want to work in the film industry. I want to make movies that inspire people and that, that people can both escape to, but also kind of reflect the world around us. And he was like, you should look into cinematography. And at that point, I was just like, I don't know what that is. So then when I went off to college, I kind of found more about it, and I just fell in love with the idea of using the camera to create emotion and to show stories and to show life. And as both Jacka and Alana said before, I am a huge techie. So I was like, got really into the tech of it, but I also love the story of it and just how you can use lighting to influence a story and use camera to influence a story. And I just wanted to be able to make stories that people could relate to, and also stories that you could maybe escape from what's going on in your life and experience just what's in the screen for 2 hours, and stories that just help people. So that's kind of where the long roundabout way of how I became a cinematographer. But yeah, I eventually, after college, I decided to backpack the world. So I went to Australia and I solo backpacked it for a year, and I went to New Zealand, and Israel. And I just wanted to see something besides the United States. I wanted to see how other people lived and other experiences and do it on my own. And after that, I came out to LA to shoot full time. So, yeah.
That's great. I love all of that, but also hearing about how, I totally agree with you about filmmaking can either give us, escapes at times, or it can tell us about ourselves and our world around us. So it's always that kind of interesting. So sometimes it does both, so, and I thought that a little bit about your film because, there's also a little bit of visual effects happening in there, and yet it was a real, an identifying moment for people that watched it, the emotions that they've experienced. So, I don't know if anyone wants to chime in about that, of kind of like what, because it was a comedy, but there was this grief, emotion as well.
So I think one of the things that we struggled with buddy comedy, when we were in the room with our two writers, like buddy comedy is quite difficult to make topical and serious, and Jacques and I were really wanting to go that route. Instead, we have managed to bring some like gravity into a funny kind of situation, and that's what we've been able to give it its seriousness there, and celebrate female friendships, rather than it just be like a fun silly little chick flick. I think we've been able to bring the emotion at the end, and it was great at the screening, having that with all the other teams, because our team obviously knew what the story was about, but having people who weren't familiar with it see it and come up to us afterwards and be like, we loved your film, it made us cry, it was so funny, and that sort of thing was a really great experience. But I will just add, when you were saying before you had one dude on your all-female
Yes.
so at the very end of our film, we do have a visual shot, which we really struggled not to find a female VFX artist, but to find one who had the capacity to do the work when we needed it done. And it was all guys putting their hand up to do it. And Jacques and I had this moment where we're like, oh, do we have to bring a guy on board? And we decided can't. And we were lucky enough that Heather Cardone, she was actually on one of the other teams, and she was able to come and join our team as well and do the shot for us. And it's turned out amazing. I love the finishing touch on the film. So
Yeah, me too.
That's great. I love, and I think Carrie, you mentioned this before too earlier, was that there was a collaborative feel even between your teams. So that's great that you're able to, collaborate in that way.
Yeah, the other teams actually, we did have an instance on our shoot, which this happens on every shoot. You have something breaks or something happens, and we had that happen on our shoot. And I was lucky enough that one of my friends was actually a cinematographer for one of the other teams. And I texted her and was like, hey, this happened. She's like, hey, you know what? I can come fix it. So she came after their shoot was over and she helped us fix our problem, and we got right back to shooting.
Yeah, that's
so it was just amazing that it was like, it didn't feel like a competition between the teams. It felt like we could still work together with the other teams. It was never, all right, we're going to try to see who makes the best film this weekend. It was, we're just all making a film to the best of our abilities, and we are going to cheer on every other team at the same time.
Yeah, right now with the state of things, I think it's really about elevating all of us together. So no one benefits from any of the films being not good.
Right.
And you could totally feel that the moment that we were all together the first time we met, and throughout the whole weekend, and even at the premiere and at the after party. And it's not like we have, the context of just our team. Now we have the context of the teams of the 6 short films, and that's wonderful.
Yeah,
right.
We actually, all the team leaders, the producers had a group chat going from the very beginning, and we were constantly like I said, they had a hard time finding gaffers, right? Messaging each other, trying to share crew and all that sort of thing. So there was another kind of like team environment going on behind the scenes as well. And I still talk to them. They'll still reach out and be like, hey guys, do you know anyone who can help out with this? So that's been a great relationship to have as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk more about next steps for the film as well as for all of you. But I'd love to check in with our audience and Nick. I know there's a couple questions that people submitted prior to our live stream. So Nick, how's it going? You want to ask the contest, or I was going to call you guys contestants, like it's a game show. Feels like it sometimes. Our guests.
Yeah, great stuff. No, we do have a couple of great questions here. So this kind of goes into what you're saying about kind of the next steps component, I suppose. But we had a question asked, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit just for the sake of brevity. But just would kind of like to hear from each of you about what you'd wish to see for the film industry in the future. Kind of both just based from a personal experience, but also based on your experience with working with a group of women on a film. And then kind of a sidecar to that, what can be done to kind of help encourage women in filmmaking?
I'll jump in. I would love to get to a point where it's not even a conversation, like where we're all just represented. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to have like groups that elevate other groups. I would love for, I'm living in pie in the sky world here. We'll get to that day. I think like the smartest thing for females to do to try to like network, meet other people, elevate each other, is get involved with organizations like Women's Weekend Film Challenge to, join women in film. There's so many organizations out there. Even if you just like join a bunch of Facebook groups like WIMPs, or there's so many out there. Like it's just a Google search away. There's a whole community of people waiting to be found. And, don't wait to be found. Like, go out, put yourself out there, post your work. I think as females, we need to be a lot more confident about putting ourselves out there. It's not something that we're used to having to do. We kind of like will take a back seat a lot of the time. I recently put a crew call out to a bunch of DPs that I know, males, females, everybody. And all the men were like straight away with their emails, talking themselves up, and a handful of the women did, and some of the women didn't respond. And I just think they were a little bit intimidated by maybe some of the questions that I asked, whereas the men weren't. Like, they didn't have experience in the things that I was asking about, but they were still like, I'm willing to learn, like, had the enthusiasm. And I think that we need to get a bit more confidence around that. We need to just kind of take on some of that male ego.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, it is. I'll jump in. For me, so everything she said, plus, I'm also looking forward to the time when, I don't have to use a hashtag saying female filmmaker or black filmmaker or, anything like this. Like, the mindset, the mentality right now of, divide and conquer, that's, I'm going to go full on political here, been used by, populism and our politicians right now is wrong. And I don't think it's the right way at all. Like, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want to be happy. So please vote. Utilize your voice and your community, your friends, create. And, as Ava DuVernay says, if your dream only includes you, it's not big enough. Mm-hmm. Like, don't be scared to ask for help, to reach out. Even at a smaller level, I think that you can always be an artistic, a creative leader. You can. You have to take on the responsibility and try to wake up and say, well, this will be a bit of a better place because I was there. And don't be scared to fail, because if you're not failing, you're not pushing enough.
Absolutely. That's great.
I mean, I 100% agree with what they both said. I think, personally, the biggest thing was for me was that for a long time I was like, well, I'm not good enough. I don't have enough experience, et cetera, et cetera. But then I started seeing, male colleagues who are at the same level getting the projects that I was saying I didn't have enough experience for. I was like, wait, I'm my own worst enemy. Mm-hmm. And we have to get out of our own ways and just realize we are good enough. We do deserve those projects. We do deserve those jobs, and we can do them. And we just have to be our own advocates. And part of that is we also have to, connect with each other and work with others that will also advocate for you. Because, as a cinematographer, you often, there's 3% of cinematographers are women, I think. So often I've heard, well, I don't know any female cinematographers. And I've heard this from so many, male directors and producers. And it's like, we're out there, we exist, we're in these groups. Like, I'm a member of the International Collective of Female Cinematographers, which is incredible. It includes Oscar nominated, includes Rachel Morrison. We are out there, we exist. But I think part of the problem is that we exist in these little bubbles of, here are all the female cinematographers, and we need to figure out a way to not only be in that little bubble, but push into the sphere of where these directors or producers are finding their DPs right now, or finding their crew right now. And I think that's the biggest challenge currently is, yes, we have all of these groups that have been created that are bringing us up, but they're bringing us up without necessarily putting us in that sphere or into, the path where all these other people are saying we don't exist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. Just to add quickly to that, because I love how we're, taking responsibility for who we are. But what we're lacking is not the talent, is the access. Mm-hmm. And so we can keep on creating our own tables, but we also need for the gatekeepers to open the doors to higher levels so we can also, make a change economically. and just give back to the communities that haven't had a voice yet. And so that's where those gatekeepers and brands like what Able Cine is doing right now and supporting this movement, which shouldn't be a movement, is right, because that's where we lack the means most of the time. And so that support means everything. And I hope and wish for more brands to come on board and to fund some of those little projects that, we all start with. No one becomes Ava or Rachel Morrison, and we all start with those projects within our community, and then we need the access.
Right. The other thing I'll say is, because I come from a corporate background, and it very much is the mentality when you're moving up within an organization or applying for a new role. You shouldn't be applying for a role that you can walk into and do with your eyes closed. You should be walking into a role with a stretch opportunity. Like, you're going to learn something, you're going to grow. If it doesn't scare you, if there's not excitement about it, like every job, every set, every film project, whatever that you're going on to, you should be like, what am I going to get out of this as well? Not just like a pace.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I love everything that everyone is saying here. I think it's a mix of what each individual can do. I think that was really good advice of having the confidence. And, Alana, when you brought up that maybe certain people are used to taking the back seat, I think that's true in general. And just a reminder of people to have that confidence, go for that job, just like you were saying, have that stretch and growth. And then also, obviously, for the communities, resources to be open, for underrepresented voices also, has to be kind of like both parties have to participate, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I wanted to touch on, before we wrap up here, where you see this project headed. So we can talk a little bit about, I know you had that screening all together. But Alana, what is it like for you now with kind of I know we're also in kind of weird times, but where do you see this project going? What are the opportunities that you're looking for?
So we have just started with our journey on the festival circuit, but we're off to a good start. So we have been an official selection of the Focus International Film Festival. We won Best Narrative Short at the International Independent Film Awards. And at the moment, we are a semi-finalist in the Vegas Movie Awards. They haven't announced their winners yet, so fingers crossed. We have a heap of other festivals that we have entered, so outcomes pending. Unfortunately, like you said, it is a weird time. So many of the festivals have been postponed because they're hoping that they'll be able to do a live in-person festival at some point. Otherwise, everything else has moved to online. Right. And credit to the festivals. They're trying to do the best they can in terms of, doing online panels and things like that. I do feel, though, that there's no equivalent to the in-person networking that you can do at a festival. So that's the thing I'm kind of like, I would love, my team to come and be able to network more and have their film and have something to be talking about and posting about. But, this isn't going to go on forever. And, we probably have another year left in our festival circuit. So I'm hoping that we will get to see some in-person festivals in that time. The other thing is there are a bunch of, there are distribution channels for short films. I have a short film called Nancy that I've had two distribution partners. They want to both put it out on their channels. One is a female filmmaker channel and the other one has an independent film channel on Prime. So there are channels. Jacques and I have been making a list of those for when the festival circuit is over to follow those up, because obviously we can't publish the film publicly, otherwise it disqualifies us for festivals. But it's certainly on the cards. I would love to see, the team and our cast get some recognition. That would be amazing. And just for it to create more opportunities and networking for everybody else, and for other people to see it and hear more about the Women's Weekend Film Challenge, for that to get more exposure so that more women do it next year and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I know that they're thinking about moving into other states as well. Yeah. So the more opportunities, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even with the odd times that we're in right now, have the three of you been able to stay in contact with each other? Alana, I think you mentioned you and Jacka were kind of still working on a future project. What is it? What's the collaboration been like?
So we both write as well. So we have like a bi-weekly writers meeting where we kind of like talk about our projects, and we both are helping each other out with some of those things. I've reached out to Carrie about some future projects that I've got coming up about, obviously needing a DP for them. So yeah, absolutely. I would work with anyone from our team again. Like Carrie said, I feel very fortunate with the crew we were assigned. As a producer, you're normally going out and hiring your crew, so that did make me a little bit nervous, having no say or control in that, but we lucked out.
We absolutely did. Yeah, so I mean, I've been working, I'm never letting Alana get away. So I've been working with her on different things. And I took advantage of quarantine to start writing my feature, my first feature. It's about my father who actually escaped his country in Africa illegally and ended up in France, and then ended up a famous actor in his country and in France. I've been developing a third short, which is more of a proof of concept for a TV pilot, and Alana is helping me with that. Have some docs on the slate as well. So just trying to keep creative throughout this crazy year, as we're not, most of us are not shooting, apart from Carrie, who shoots nonstop. So yeah, that's that.
That's great. And Carrie, how about you? So you have been working a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I have kind of been shooting. It's been weird. I've been doing a lot of one-person band interview, Zoom call things, where it's basically, I show up, I set up lights, set up the camera, connect it to Zoom, and then leave, and they interview whoever it is. And I've been doing it for a few different TV channels and networks, but it's not the same as working with a crew and working on something narrative, which is really where my heart lies. And I also, it's pretty much just been that during these COVID times. And I hope at some point we can get back to being on set and shooting these narrative projects. I have a few that I'm signed on to that we're just kind of waiting for when it'll be safe, and when part of the problem is when we have, a 2-day short or super low budget feature, is that COVID increases the budget by 30%, and most of those projects don't have the 30% extra to put into them to do that. So they're kind of all pushed until it's safe to do it, or until they can find that extra 30% in the budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Well, you guys have been so inspiring. We're getting to the end here. One thing I would love to hear from all of you, you've shared different things that you've learned or you believe about filmmaking, about telling your story, about telling everyone, other stories. What's something that you learned from this challenge that, you're taking with you to your future projects that you want to share as a piece of advice for our audience that may be watching? Maybe that's a tough question, but
Something that we learned from this particular project. I have something else that I would like to share.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
It's my favorite quote, and I just think that, like, at the moment the entertainment industry has been hit pretty hard, and people are down. I'm a producer and I can be in development on everything at the moment, but even like however many docs or features that I've got ready to go, like, it's not the same as the way that it was. But there's this quote by Italian-American filmmaker Frank Capra, and it is, "No saint, no pope, no general, no sultan has ever had have the power that a filmmaker has, the power to talk to hundreds of millions of people for 2 hours in the dark. And I just think that like it's a really nice time to reflect on that as a filmmaker and know that, you know, the work that we do is important, and, you know, it does guide people through the dark, and we will come back and we will be stronger and we will have so many stories to tell and there will be an abundance of content, and I'm excited about that time. So I think, you know, I just wanted to leave on something positive, something to look for.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you for that.
That's great. I learned that I had absolutely no problem telling 30 people what to do, which is, which is really scary. But I certainly learned that that as Carrie said, I could be my own worst enemy. So I just need to go back to the moment when I was a child and I started to get lied to, that we were a minority, that we were going to be paid less, all of that. And just make sure that I bring all the pieces to bring my own self, my full self to the table, and trust myself.
That's great. Those are hard acts to follow, Carrie.
Yeah, no kidding. I love that quote, by the way, Alana. That's great.
Really answer the question.
Yeah, you just made it a lot harder. You're like, screw the question, I'm going this direction. I guess, God, the one thing I took away from it is, you know, I don't know. That was, I think the Women's Week in Film Challenge was my 20-something short that I've shot. And the one really, like, the thing that I really, like, need to keep reminding myself is that to just trust myself. And the, like, one thing that came out of it is, even when you work with people you don't know, it's just, you got to trust everybody around you to know what they're doing, to do their job. And when you can do that, it becomes something magical.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. You've all been very inspiring. I've gotten goosebumps a couple times throughout different things that you've said, and that's why I love doing these things.
Thank you.
If I quote Jennifer Lopez, just because we have to do a female, she calls them goosies. So I have those right now. So, you know, thank you for all the audience joining us today, as well as Alana and Carrie and Jacka for joining us, for sharing their stories and a piece of their work with us. We look forward to seeing more from each of you, as well as seeing, you know, how the trajectory of your short film for life takes you. So that's really amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Creative Forces later this month. We're going to be featuring the director of photography from Last Chance U, so check us out later in the month, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.